Today's event is so important and so meaningful to us that obviously you can see it has great interest all throughout our region. You know, as farmers, we're accustomed to dealing with many uncertainties. Uncertainties of the weather, the volatility of market prices. But this morning, thank the good Lord, we're going to get some certainty and some common sense approach from Washington, D.C. that should give us some security and vision for the future as it relates to waters of the U.S. I think since the announcement last week in Washington, D.C., Administrator Wheeler, this is your first visit since that announcement, and we certainly welcome you to Tennessee and appreciate you being here, but more so the efforts on your behalf and your team for tackling this difficult issue. And it's been a great week if you're a farmer as it relates to Washington, D.C. We have a new farm bill that we expect to be signed tomorrow. Secretary Perdue, we thank you for delivering on that, and the announcement yesterday that there'll be another market facilitation payment very much needed in farm communities. So we appreciate you so much. We have many special guests with us today, and I'm going to plead for forgiveness that some of you may miss, but all of you are special, and we're thrilled to have you here. In Tennessee, we're blessed in so many ways. We're blessed with an abundance of natural resources that allow our farmers to provide food and fiber for our fellow man. And that's why today's meeting is so important. It is now my pleasure to introduce my good friend and a great advocate for American agriculture, Georgia poultry farmer, Zippy Duval, who represents the largest farm organization in this country and does so with an amazing talent and resilience to do that each and every day. So at this time, if you would, please welcome American Farm Bureau President Zippy Duval.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and it's good to be here around all these tractors. And I don't know if the governor-elect's still here, but I have a tractor story like that too. See, I had to run from my job too, and I was going around the country talking to boards of directors and telling them what my vision was for American Farm Bureau. And at two of those 30 meetings I went to in 3 months, and two of them, at the end of my comments, the first question was, so what kind of tractor did you grow up on? What color tractor did you grow up on? So I grew up on multiple colors, so I was safe there. But I'm proud to be here with you. Today is a good day. Last week was a good week, but it did not come easily. And yes, Tennessee Farm Bureau and all the farm bureaus across this country has worked hard, real hard, and all its membership has worked hard to see this day, and we're just proud to be part of it today. See, about 5 years ago, there was the waters of the U.S. rule turned loose from Washington, D.C., from the previous administration, that was the largest land grab in the history of our government. It took away your private property rights to be able to do what you want to do with your land, and you're the men and women that grew up on it for generations that really know how to take care of it and how to make it the most productive land in the world. Took those rights away from us. And what an amazing day when you turn the page in history and a new administration comes with the idea of, if we tear down all these rules and regulations, our country will go back to work. Our farmers will become more productive, and we'll regenerate rural America. And that's where we're at today. You hear that old motto, promises made, promises kept. This is one of them. This is one of them. We're so proud to be part of it. See, 5 years ago, we started a campaign called Ditch the Rule at American Farm Bureau. If you're a Farm Bureau member, you heard about that Ditch the Rule campaign because it spread all over this country, and there were signs in everybody's yard saying, ditch this water rule that takes our private property rights away. Today, we're ditching that rule. And we are so proud and so thankful to have Administrator Wheeler here with us and Secretary Perdue here with us to talk about what a success story this really is. So it is a good day in American agriculture and in a farmer's life that we have the right to do what we want to do with our land again and take care of it like we know how to take care of it. You know, this is not the only thing that's happening. I'll touch briefly on some of the other things that's happening because the Farm Bill was passed, and in that Farm Bill is one of the big issues around broadband, and that broadband decision in the Farm Bill is going to be sending millions of dollars to USDA to be able to help connect rural America. Because internet, broadband access is not a luxury anymore. It's a necessity for our farmers and our ranchers across this country. So that, along with the certainty that comes along with 5 years of Farm Bill, is just a wonderful, wonderful day. So we have great things that's happening around agriculture. I know of a lot of you, and I myself, because I'm a beef farmer, and I used to be a dairy farmer, and I'm real close to dairymen, I know that we're going to be glad to put 18 in our rearview mirror. But we're going to start 19 out with some really good policies that are happening. And we have many, many more opportunities. So I'm just proud to be here with these two fine gentlemen that are representing a leadership team and an administration that wants to work together and tear down the obstacles that are in our way. Speaking of obstacles, I remember when my good friend Secretary Perdue came to office. In one of his first speeches he made in Washington, one of his 4 or 5 goals that he mentioned was he wanted to tear down all those obstacles that gets in our way each and every day. And he is working with EPA and Interior and all the departments to make sure that we do that. So I'm excited about that. But I have the honor today to introduce that man. See, a lot of you, Mr. Sonny Perdue has been a friend of mine since I was Farm Bureau president in Georgia. And I'll tell you, and I told the group right before this, that the first time he and I really talked on the phone, I had talked to him just as a citizen, as a farmer, but as I talked to him on the phone as president, he had already called 3 times, and the 4th time he called, he finally got me, and he says 2 things to me right off the bat. He said, one, he says, it's not supposed to be harder to get a hold of the Farm Bureau president than it is the governor. And he said, and you go tell all your farmer friends, they're welcome through the front door of the capital of Georgia today. And that's what kind of man this man is. He's not only a veterinarian, he's not only bought and sold grain as a business, he's not only planting and grew soybeans, he's also been a dairyman. He's run the state. He's done a lot of things that relate to what we do each and every day. And I know that he gets up every morning trying to make a difference in our lives. I have a great appreciation for this man, not just because of who he is, but because of his heart. He has a Christian heart and a servant's heart. Would you please give a great welcome to the Secretary of Agriculture, United States of America, Secretary Sonny Perdue.
Thank you. Thank you all. Again, we're delighted to be back in Tennessee. I think it's the 6th trip, Governor, so we're glad, and it won't be the last either. So congratulations to you and to Senator and Congressman. We are delighted, and we look forward to working with you two in Washington, continuing to work with you, Senator Blackburn, and Governor, you're a good neighbor. Tennessee's been a good neighbor, and we look forward to continuing to work at USDA with this great state and helping your vision of making Tennessee agriculture great. It's good to see all of you. Merry Christmas, everybody. I told an earlier group this morning, I said, it's Christmas time, and someone's brought a big gift, and we're going to talk about that gift here in a minute. But I'm just delighted to be here with you. Zippy's right. 2018 hasn't been the best, most prosperous year in American agriculture, but we have had a pretty good week. Obviously, a great vote on the Farm Bill. The President will sign Thursday afternoon. We're excited about that. that does provide some certainty at going forward over the different things, and there are many components that Senator talked about that are in there that will be very helpful for all of us. The President announced yesterday, again, the second tranche of the market facilitation program. That'll be a pretty good Christmas present. We at USDA are going to work as hard as we can to get that money out as quickly as possible. And we're praying that we don't have a government shutdown, but everybody comes together and continues so we can do the job for you that you expect us to do going forward in that. China came back in the soybean market a little bit, and we want to make sure that's a good earnest money on better trade relationships going into there. Obviously, we visited yesterday with our Ambassador Lighthizer with USTR. We actually hosted a luncheon for his group, a team at USDA, to thank them for their efforts on behalf of U.S. agriculture in the renewed NAFTA, the USMCA agreement. And but we're always looking for more, and we volunteer to be as helpful in the EU discussions and the Japan discussions as well as the China discussions overall. So we look forward to participating in that as well. So we are delighted to be here today. My role is really auxiliary today, and I want to tell you why that is. I'm happy to be here with Administrator Andrew Wheeler of the EPA, as well as Assistant Secretary Ryan Fisher of the Corps of Engineers. Why is that? These are, you know, USDA has a lot to do with agriculture in America, but these other two agencies have also a lot to do. And you well know that as producers, and you know how integral all of us are to that. I am so delighted to be able to tell you, under President Trump's administration, he's insisted that we have an interagency cooperation. And you can make an edict like that at the top, but it really takes leadership to make that happen functionally. And that's what we see with Andrew Wheeler, head of the administrator of EPA. There's a real locked-in spirit there between EPA. Not only does Administrator Wheeler have to do with the waters of the U.S., which we'll talk about in a second, but certainly pesticide regulations and crop protection chemicals, and even the emissions that your cow pies are emitting out there. So those are the kind of things that he's been involved in this year, and we are grateful that you bring a common sense perspective to agriculture. You, as an attorney, you've told us about your representation of farmers in some of the nonsensical rules that they were trying to comply with. We begin all this with the belief that farmers are rule followers. I don't think you can be a farmer without being a rule follower, because that's the law of the land. Governor, you can't plant in August and harvest in September. You got to do things decently in order, and that's the way farmers want to do. They are stewards of the land. They want to leave it better than they found it for their families and for their communities and for their states in America. And we begin with that premise. But they also need to know what the rules are and the clarity, because it's very unsettling to be on your own land doing what you've done for years, and a federal regulator come out and say, here's a summons. You're violating the law, and we're going to prosecute you, and we're going to fine you. Unless you settle, we're going to take you to court. Those are the kind of things, the rules that we were living under, that were oppressive. That's exactly what President Trump is talking about when he talks about relieving American agriculture and America of some of the oppressive rules and regulations that we placed on ourselves, so that he can unleash the productivity of American agriculture once again. We know that our farmers are the most productive. You've fed, you've clothed, you've fueled the world for years with the most wholesome, healthy food supply and affordable food supply of any developed country in the world. In fact, we also know that because of your productivity, you're taken for granted many times. I've kind of been prone to using a proverb recently with all the challenges we have in agriculture, and this one will be challenged as well. It goes like this: when man has not enough to eat, he has one problem. When he has enough to eat, he has many problems. We've created many problems in society today because you all have given them the right to be complacent about their food supply. And we're 2 or 3 generations away from many people having grown up on a farm. Even their grandparents may not have. And they don't know what it takes to do what you do. They don't know the risk-taking that you take each and every day. They don't know all the things that you face. You shouldn't have to face risk when it comes to rules and regulations of your government. This is the government. This is an administration that wants to work for you, not against you. And that's what we... As you know, this is probably one of the icon, Administrator Wheeler, of the oppressive rules that agriculture felt when they could not conduct their business in the way that they had for years, and they were told that a ditch on their farm belonged to the United States rather than to their families that they may have inherited 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 generations ago there. That's pretty disconcerting, and it's demoralizing in a way more than just functionally. It's demoralizing to realize this is our government, the United States of America, coming in and doing these things. So I want to spend my time in applauding the Environmental Protection Administration and Administrator Wheeler and all of his team working on this rule to get it right. I want to applaud R.D. James and the Corps of Engineers and Ryan Fisher for working together to get it right. We all have to work together. You farmers know that NRCS has to qualify your farm to be in compliance for farm programs. And then to have another agency come over and say, well, no, that's not right. You're not complying, and we're going to punish you. That's not right. And what we want to do, what's happening here, is not only with the rule issuance of this rule defining very clearly the waters of the U.S., we have a commitment in spirit and in heart between the USDA, the Environmental Protection Administration, and the Corps of Engineers to work on behalf of American agriculture and the American economy going forward under President Trump's direction. So we want to thank you for that. It's a great day to be able to work in a place where you feel like people are listening. And I know I've been in your place as private sector to say, you know, do they really know what's going on out here? Administrator Wheeler's a guy that knows what's going on out here. He's been in civil service before. He's been in private practice before. And really, from a lawyer perspective, it really is good to have an attorney there who can thread the needle, because the rules, the waters of the U.S. will be litigated. You know, there are going to be people who, the moment it's filed, will be litigating against it. We've just got that. That's that culture we're in today. But you all need to stand up. You need to comment on this rule. They have done as good a job as possible over defining very clearly. And I love what Dave said this morning. It's very clear. If it's not in, it's out. And that's the way that's almost like the 10th Amendment, Governor, is that if it's not part of the federal government, it's a state responsibility. So this is a good way to abide by the 10th Amendment. If it's not in the rule, it's out. If it's not covered, it's out. And that's a clear definition. You folks who till the ground know your land, you know it. You'll be able to tell that without a regulator coming into your place, onto your place, and saying that's not right. So, Andrew Wheeler, you've got my ultimate respect. I want to thank you so much for your cooperation in this, as well as other types of things that we worked together here this year on that. And I want to tell you, it's a real joy to know that we've got Andrew Wheeler, who understands this business. We've got R.D. James from Missouri, who's farmed for years on the banks of the Mississippi River, an authentic farmer, part of the Mississippi River Commission, at the Corps of Engineers. Folks, we got some people who know what we do, and that's important to American agriculture. So I am just honored to be here this morning to thank them for what they've done and the way they've done it, and to help us help you be all that you can be as American agriculture has been. So Merry Christmas. God bless you. Thank you. Andrew Wheeler, please come up and tell us about this.
Thank you, Secretary Perdue, for the introduction. You are a true champion of American agriculture, and you and your team have been invaluable partners in our efforts to carry out the President's agenda. I just want to pause just to reflect on the fact that you have the head of the EPA and the head of the Department of Agriculture here today to announce the Waters of the U.S. regulation. That certainly did not happen in 2015. I don't think that's ever happened, and that's because we worked hand in hand. We relied upon Secretary Perdue's advice and his staff's advice on how to make sure that we craft this regulation so that it would be fair and honest to America's farmers. And I hope that we accomplish that, but we certainly accomplished that with working in conjunction with both our Army Corps partners as well as Department of Agriculture. So thank you, Secretary Perdue, for you and your staff. It's a privilege to have Governor-elect Bill Lee here, Senator-elect Marsha Blackburn. We're certainly looking forward to you being in the Senate this next year. And Congressman-elect John Ross, thank you for being here today as well. The future of Tennessee is in good hands. A special thank you to Zippy Duvall and Jeff Aiken and the Tennessee Farm Bureau, and thank you for hosting us today. And thank you for your leadership on this issue. I also want to recognize Tennessee's Commissioner of Agriculture, Jay Templeton, who is also a valuable member of EPA's Local Government Advisory Committee, who helps provide advice to us on how to move forward to protect America's farmers. I do want to recognize the head of my water office, Dave Ross. Dave and his team are the ones who put all this together. Owen McDonald, who's here with us from his team, who did most of the legal drafting of the regulation. Dave, if you and Owen, I don't see Owen, but if you could please stand. If you both could stand, I think they both deserve a round of applause for their work. So it's great to be here in Tennessee. This is my first visit to Tennessee as the administrator of the agency. This is also our first visit, our trip outside of Washington, D.C. to talk about this regulation, and I think it's fitting that we came here today. It's also my first trip in my life to Nashville, and I've been wanting to come here for a long time. I'm a huge country music fan, so it's great to be here. Unfortunately, we just were able to drive by the road with all the bars and hockey tonks. I haven't been able to go into them yet, but I will come back because it looks like a lot of fun. We're blessed to live in a nation founded by farmers and builders, and thanks to the American people, we now have a builder back in the White House. President Trump understands how regulatory burdens stifle American innovation and economic development. When he took office, he immediately began a process to remove and replace those burdens. At the top of the list was the Obama administration's 2015 Waters of the United States definition. When the Obama EPA put forward the 2015 definition, they claimed it was in the interest of water quality, but it was really about power. Power in the hands of the federal government over farmers, developers, and landowners. We're here today to tell you that we're putting an end to that power grab. I want to highlight three overarching principles that are central to our new proposed definition. First, that property owners should be able to stand on their property and be able to tell if a water is a federal or state without having to hire outside professionals. Two, we are clearly defining the differences between federally protected waterlands and state protected waterways. And three, that we are providing the certainty to the American public needs and in a manner that will be upheld by the courts. That's why we closely follow the language of the Clean Water Act and the relevant Supreme Court decisions. We want a regulation that the courts will uphold and that will be the law of the land for years to come. Congress did not intend the federal government to be the nation's development planner. Government has a responsibility to protect the people, but not run their lives. In line with President Trump's 2017 executive order, our proposal would replace the 2015 definition with one that respects the rule of law and the primary role of states in managing their land and water resources. For the first time, we are drawing a line between federally protected wetlands and state protected wetlands. It will be a clear, bright line so that anyone can walk the line. That was a Johnny Cash reference for those of you who missed that. I asked my speechwriter to throw in a Johnny Cash reference. I think maybe I can do better. The 2015 Obama regulation was crazy. It would have caused American farmers to fall to pieces, while the Obama political people in D.C. had sweet dreams over their power grab. You like that one better? Okay, I'm just gonna run with it. They would have regulated every country road, despite the poems, prayers, and promises of President Obama. All right, I'll go back to the speech. For the first time, well, actually, I already said that. Finally, our proposal will ensure that America's water protections, among the best in the world, will remain strong, while giving states and tribes the ability to manage their waters in ways that best protect their natural resources and local economies. Tennessee has invested significant resources to understand and protect its waterways. This state takes great pride in its ability to protect its natural resources, and it's time that Washington, D.C. recognize that. Our proposal identifies 6 categories of waters that are waters of the U.S. 1, traditional navigable waters, what you think of when you think of a navigable water, a river. It's something that you can drive a boat down. Number 2, tributaries to those navigable waters. Number 3, certain ditches, such as those that are used for navigation or those that are affected by the tides, would still be a water of the U.S. Certain lakes and ponds that are in the tributary navigable water system. Impoundments would still be regulated, and wetlands that are adjacent to any of the waters I just mentioned. The proposal also details what are not waters of the U.S. What are not, as Sonny Perdue said, if you weren't on the list of the 6, then you're not a water of the U.S. But we go a step further and we actually define additional waterways that are not waters of the U.S., such as features that only contain water during or in response to a rainfall. That would be out. Groundwater would be out. Many ditches, including most roadside or farm ditches. A ditch that a farmer dug on his or her property would not be a water of the U.S. Prior converted croplands will not be waters of the U.S. Yeah, please applaud to that one. Stormwater control features would be out, and so would wastewater and waste treatment systems. I want to take a moment to address some misinformation that is already being spread about our proposal. There are some reports that under our proposal, 60% of the nation's streams would lose federal protection, and one report said that 80% of the streams in California would go unregulated. That is not correct. The previous administration did use the 60% number, but they did not have enough information to accurately or responsibly quantify changes in federally regulated waters. For example, the maps the previous administration used do not adequately distinguish between ephemeral or intermittent waters, which would be treated differently under our proposed rule. As a result, their estimates should not be used to characterize our proposal in any way. And in the case of California, the state already has surface water regulations in place that are stricter than the federal government's. I also want to address a report that EPA misled the public about the existence of stream and wetlands data sets. That's not true either. We attempted to use the best available data from USGS and Fish and Wildlife Service. However, we found serious limitations with the data. For instance, some of the maps used an entirely different definition of wetlands compared to the federal regulatory definition. And our economic analysis supporting our proposal goes into great detail on these limitations and why the data cannot accurately be applied to our definition. But this shows you the point of our proposal, to clearly define the difference between federal and state waters. We haven't had that in the past, and the data hasn't been there to support the difference, and we are working on both of those. In fact, we convened a work group of EPA and Army Corps scientists and regulators the very day the proposal was signed last week to explore ways we can accurately depict which waters are in and which waters are out. I also want to emphasize that our proposal would not impact other federal water protections, such as the Safe Drinking Water Act, or our ongoing restoration efforts, such as the Chesapeake Bay, the Great Lakes, the Everglades, or the Gulf Coast. Right now, because of litigation, the 2015 rule is in effect in 22 states, while the previous regulations, prior to 2015, and issued in the 1980s, are in effect in the remaining 28 states. This regulatory patchwork creates confusion and impedes economic development. Our proposal would establish national consistency and provide greater certainty to states and landowners. The proposal is available online right now, and we will take comment for 60 days after publication in the Federal Register, and we'll hold public listening sessions as well. Please take a close look at the proposal and let us know your thoughts. Let us know if we got it right, if we need to change things, if we got the definitions correct. Please take a hard look at it and let us know what you think about it. Our goal is a more precise definition that gives the people of Tennessee the freedom and certainty to do what they do best: build homes, grow crops, and develop projects that improve the environment and the lives of their fellow citizens. I'm proud of the progress we are making across the agency on behalf of the American public. The U.S. is a global leader in pollution reduction. At the same time, more Americans are working today than ever before, and we are the #1 energy producer in the world. How many other countries could claim those accomplishments? Our formula for success is clear and straightforward. Incentivize innovation, not stifle it with regulation. Encourage cooperation with the states, not coercion of the states, and promote the rule of law. These principles are not new or unique. They are ingrained in America's DNA, but they have a new champion in the White House, President Trump. And thanks to his leadership, our economy is thriving, and we are making great strides protecting public health and the environment. Thank you for your time. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, key leader of the federal agency tasked with helping us craft and implement the new definition. Please join me in welcoming Ryan Fisher, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for the U.S. Army for Civil Works.
It's been a big year for the Army, right? Think about the missions we do. We've restored a power grid in Puerto Rico. We've installed blue roofs on homes in Houston. We've cleaned up, toxic debris after wildfires in California. And by the way, our leadership fights wars too, right? In the middle of all this, equally as important, we have the 404 program, and this Waters of the U.S. rulemaking is just as important as all of those things this past year. I'm here on behalf of my boss, R.D. James. Many of you might know him. The secretary mentioned he is a Missouri farmer himself, cotton gin operation. He spent about 3 decades on the Mississippi River Commission, so he's been close to these issues, been close to flooding issues, regulatory issues, and all of it, just like all of you have, so he understands it. And I guess I just want to briefly comment on the things he brought to this. There were 3 things really that he was looking for when we sat down to craft this rule with EPA, and those are balance. You've heard folks talk about balance here, and it's 2 kinds of balance, right? It's balance of protecting waters that are undoubtedly federal with the balance of economic development and farming that needs to support this country's economy. Then the other balance, of course, is the balance between federal and state authority in this thing. There's been a bit of overreach in the past, we believe, and this rule represents the fact that, hey, your federal government trusts you, Tennessee, to regulate the waters that are yours. And I think that's a priority of the president, certainly a priority of my boss, R.D. James, in this as well. And common sense, right? You've heard the word common sense thrown around. We wanted to put common sense into these definitions. My boss, on his first day in office, we sat down with him to start going over what we were doing on WOTUS, and I said, well, sir, right now we're sitting down doing definitions. We're talking about what a ditch is. And he looked at me and said, Fisher, you don't know what a ditch is? It's pretty simple, right? So he sent me back, writes it up on a cocktail napkin, and there it is, right? Common sense. This is a ditch, Fisher. Get it right. And that's what we've we tried to accomplish here, and I think we've done that. I think we've done a good job getting that. And it's the other part of common sense is also forward-looking. The Corps of Engineers is going to be responsible for implementing this rule, right? And we want to make sure that, I'm sure you've all dealt with regulatory field operators with the Corps of Engineers, and maybe even in the same district, maybe in the Nashville district of the Corps, you've talked to one employee who's told you one thing and you've got a different opinion from somebody else, and that's not common sense at all, right? We're trying to get rid of those inconsistencies so that when you talk to, and not only when you talk to the Corps, but when you talk to USDA or the EPA, you're getting the same answer from your entire federal government. The secretary was awesome. He spent many nights on the phone with my boss going over your conservation programs and this rule, and we wanted to make sure we weren't duplicating anything or stepping on toes of USDA, and I think we've accomplished that. So that's great work by the Secretary there. The third and final thing is clarity. You've heard folks talk about clarity. Real briefly, R.D. James told me, look, listen, we want farmers to farm. We don't want them to sit in their living room and talk with attorneys and consultants about whether or not the federal government has jurisdiction over their waters in some capacity. We want this to be clear, understandable, and predictable for them, so that you all can operate your farms and support this country's national economy. So yeah, Jeff, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I think we got this right, and we'll know if we got it right when we hear from all of you. I think that's the big thing here. The administrator mentioned that this will be published in the Federal Register probably here shortly after the new year, which will kick off a 60-day comment period, and that's going to be crucial, right? We're going to get thousands, maybe even a million some comments, and we want to make sure that we hear from everybody to help us craft and finalize this thing. So thank you, and Merry Christmas.
I'm going to ask Administrator Wheeler and Secretary Perdue if they would to join me on stage along with Zippy Duval to address some of the questions. We've had some great questions submitted and have just a few minutes to address some of those.
With this proposal going out, I expect to receive over 1 million comments on this proposal. Please make sure your voices are heard. Please let us know if we got it right. Tell us if the definitions are correct. What we really sought to do in this is to define every term. You know, in the years past, a lot of the terms went undefined, and it was left to the individual enforcement people to try to figure out what they thought the definition of the words are. So what we try to do here in order to provide certainty and clarity across the board in the entire country was to define every important term within the proposal. Read those definitions. Make sure that we got it right. Make sure we got prior converted croplands right. And if we didn't, you have to blame his staff because they helped us write it. But make sure we got the definition right. And again, we really did work arm in arm with the Department of Agriculture and the Army Corps of Engineers, all three of us, to get this proposal where it is today and let us know whether or not the terms make sense and whether or not the proposal makes sense.
Thank you, sir. Let's be very clear that we understood his response, that the EPA has done their job, the Corps of Engineers has done their job, USDA has done their job. All of us in this room now have to help get this thing over the finish line. So let's be very adamant and deliberate in helping this become final. Let's leave here with a renewed spirit and work together to see this plan implemented, and we wish all of you a safe trip home and a Merry Christmas. Thank you.